Well, hey there, guys. I'm Axel the Beast of ZeldaEngine.net, and I haven't done one of these non-Curiosity Shop videos for a little while. I apologize for that. Halloween's coming soon, so I want to talk to you this week and next week about some of the creepier aspects of the Zelda series. I'm going to actually talk about the scary themes on their own next week, as we're, well, just about to reach Halloween. But this week I have something a little more specific. I'd like to talk about the Undead of the Zelda series. The Undead have appeared in basically every game. I mean, that's a bit odd, don't you think? I mean, most games there were just like normal enemies. They were just like in the original Legend of Zelda, you had Stalfos, and you had, you always had skulls or skeletons or things like that in any Zelda game, really. It's when they got to the newer games, starting with like Ocarina of Time, or Ocarina of Time is a good start. And it's in those games where they had the 3D graphics and they could more easily have more diverse areas and make the enemies look distinct instead of them being little sprite graphics, that they started putting effort into the themes of the areas. The areas actually felt very much more distinct from each other, whereas in the older 2D titles, the areas felt more similar. And starting with Ocarina of Time, they had areas that were distinct from each other. And one of the distinct themes they started using is creepy areas. But more specifically, they began to meld these they didn't begin to, they started with melding the creepy areas with these undead-themed areas. And, they had the Shadow Temple in Ocarina of Time, which was the creepy area, but it was also the undead area. And, they continued this. Majora's Mask had the whole Icona, region. It wasn't even just a dungeon area, it was an entire land, and it had a lot of creepy stuff in it. There were undead all over the place in Icona. And it's interesting because even when they got to like the Minish Cap, which was another 2D game, they still used they tried to borrow from the 3D titles in that they tried to keep the areas diverse from each other, and in that game they did have an undead area. It wasn't a full dungeon, but it did have a mini dungeon. It was the Royal Valley. And it's just they keep this consistent thing of having these creepy areas, but they also have this consistent thing of having an undead theme every game. Every game has an area that has an undead theme, and it's interesting. There's a big focus on it. I mean, what's the reason for that? Ultimately, it's because of fiction in general. In fiction in general, the idea of the living dead is pretty much a meme of sorts. I mean, it's like everywhere you go in fiction, you see a bunch of walking skeletons or zombies. Point is that whether it's like fantasy fiction, modern zombie stories, or science fiction, you constantly see the living dead as an ultimate sort of darkness that you're up against. It's always, when you're confronting different sorts of evils, the undead seem to be the top evil. It seems like in Dungeons and Dragons stories I've read, there are actually cases where the undead are the ultimate evil, literally the scariest thing you could possibly come up against. And keep in mind, this is a story that contains demons and stuff sometimes. I mean, why is that? I think the ultimate reason is that the idea of you can have monsters, you can have animals, you can have psychotic villains or world domination types, you can even have demons, but these are all creatures or entities or beings or people that have some kind of grounding in some kind of natural reality, even if it's a fantasy natural reality. Like, demons, that's a concept well rooted in religious origins, and it fits in there, and so it's something people are familiar with. Whereas the idea of the undead, no matter where you stick it in any kind of fictional story, it's still the idea of something. I mean, it's a consistent theme in anything that the dead stay dead. People die. Even in stories where people have the ability to manipulate trees or make stone walls pop out of nowhere, no matter what magical powers they have, that's consistent. The dead, you can't touch death. Those who do are crazy or evil. The point is that to raise the dead is unnatural. Even demons, you could argue, are natural. They're a part of the world, but with the undead, it's something that's just not supposed to be. And it's like the ultimate evil in a way, because it's an ultimate perversion of, what things are supposed to be. Things stay dead. That's a little getting off topic, but it kind of helps establish why it's such a big thing in fiction. Now, in Zelda, it's not exactly that deep. I mean, I'm not even sure if everyone in fiction considers it that deeply, but the point is that it's an ultimate evil in almost every place you see. In Zelda, it's been used mostly as a theme, or for atmosphere. They use it as a reason to diversify the areas you come up against. You see, you go to different dungeons, and they're all very different. You go to the water dungeon, like the water temple in Ocarina of Time, where you're diving underwater, manipulating the water level. There isn't even a lot of enemies in that dungeon. It had this atmosphere of this mysterious water place. Whereas, other dungeons, they have different themes, and the Shadow Temple's primary theme was the undead. Well, there was other stuff like darkness, illusion, madness in general, but there was a consistent theme of the undead, and they took it further in Majora's Mask with that whole area. The point is they use the undead as a way to make areas feel different from each other, two distinct feelings for two distinct areas. You get a different atmosphere and emotion for the area, and so far, Zelda has used the undead strictly for this reason. What's interesting is that since it has such a kind of deeper undertone to it in fiction in general, it would be interesting if they capitalized on that. The idea of the undead could actually be a full plot point or selling point of the story in itself. They could make an entire game based around that. And in some ways, that could end up being something scarier than Ganondorf, scarier than Majora. It's an ultimate twisting of the way of the world, and it's maybe not creepier than Majora, because Majora was going to completely destroy the... Well, you get my point anyway. It's something that could be used well for the plot. It's something that I think that it's interesting that they've done it, and I'd like the undead to stay there. And I don't mind that it's just a theme, but I'm just saying, what if? Food for thought. What they could change that, and they could make the undead a more interesting part. But they could also keep it as just monsters. Like I said, food for thought, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything needs to be changed. It's not like there's a problem. It's something interesting worth noting. That's, I guess, all I gotta say. That's it for this time. Next week I'll have another video about something creepy in Zelda for Halloween. I'll see you guys later.